Mr. Chairman, we're all set.
Thank you, Todd. Good evening. I'm Kevin Ahern, Chair of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual meeting. For the record, I'd like to note that the required meeting agenda and application materials are all available on the town website. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to risk the transmission of COVID-19, this hearing is being conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B and 7I. Will the town planner please call the roll?
Commissioner Kaplan.
Present.
Commissioner Binkhurst.
Present.
Commissioner Gomes.
Present.
Commissioner Gillette.
Present.
Commissioner Prestage.
Present.
Commissioner Lewis.
Present.
Mr. Ahern.
Present.
With that, Mr. Chairman, we have a full quorum of the commission, including our two alternates.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. For the record, I'd like to note that we have a full quorum of the commission tonight. Commission members and town staff are participating via WebEx. Members of the public can view the meeting live on West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier TV Channel 6098 or at www.whctv.org. The meeting is also being recorded for on-demand viewing, which will be available on the town's website. Because of the virtual format of this meeting, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before I begin. First, I ask that all participants please mute your microphones on your devices when you're not speaking. Second, pursuant to Executive Order 7B, all speakers must state their name and title each time they speak. Also, I will ask members of the commission and staff to not address other participants directly. Comments and requests for information must be made through the chair. After you state your name, simply preface your question or comment through the chair, and when you are done, I will recognize the person who is most appropriate to respond. With that, will the town planner please proceed with the first matter on our agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Todd Dumais, Town Planner. First matter on tonight's agenda are the approval of the regular virtual meeting minutes from Wednesday, September 9th. For this item, Commissioner Kaplan will be seated for voting purposes.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. So we have the minutes for the September 9th meeting. We have a motion on the minutes.
I make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Binkhurst. Under current rules, we need only the motion and not the second. So therefore, we can proceed. Any comments on the minutes?
None.
Okay, seeing none. Mr. Dumais, will you please hold the commission?
Mr. Kaplan.
Approved.
Ms. Gillette.
Yes.
Mr. Prestige.
Aye.
Mr. Binkhurst.
Aye.
Mr. Ahern.
Aye.
With that, Mr. Chairman, the minutes from Wednesday, September 9th, TPC regular meeting have been unanimously approved.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Moving on to our next item is communications. I see none on the agenda. Mr. Dumais, do you have any to add?
I do not.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Moving on to new business. Item number 3, Mr. Dumais.
Thank you. For the record, Todd Dumais, Town Planner. Item number 3, Fern Street Bridge, Town of West Hartford, application Inland Wetland 1127 of the Engineering Division of the Town of West Hartford, requesting approval of an inland wetland and watercourse permit to conduct certain regulated activities which may have an adverse impact on a wetland area. The applicant is proposing to replace the Fern Street Bridge, including the realignment of the west branch of the Trout Brook for approximately 200 feet upstream of the bridge. The proposed work is within both a watercourse and within a 150-foot upland review area. Submitted for agency receipt on October 5th, presented for a determination of significance. I think that summary should be a flag to those on the commission or agency. There is work directly in the watercourse, some wetland areas, and some of it will be significant. I'll reserve any detailed explanation and open it up to the commission for any questions.
the nature of, we have before us a inland wetlands application. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. The nature of the decision to be made here is whether or not we will entertain a full hearing next month if we determine that this item is significant. And so for purposes of discussion, do we have any questions for Mr. Dumais on this item?
Yes.
Ms. Gillette?
I think this is clearly an application that the reason that you have an inland wetlands commission, that's what we're for. To that issue, I also would like to ask, and I did not get a chance to review the materials online fully, but whether there is any integration with Ms. Rubino Turco's plan for pocket parks and spots within our recreational parks. What other sort of tie-ins are involved, and that be addressed? But I think this is clearly Did you not hear any of that?
Liz, I think you got muted for a couple minutes.
That was me. Yes, this is clearly an inland wetlands issue, and I had questions, having not had a chance to review the materials, but to find out whether there are other ancillary projects in town that could be coordinated with this at the same time. I'm thinking of Ms. Rubino Turco's plans for parks, mini parks within the parks, in terms of the engineering involved, and would like to see that addressed as well. Thank you.
This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Todd, do you have anything to comment on that?
I don't. Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Gillette, I will make sure that we coordinate, or I can report on any activity in terms of park planning, how this proposed project impacts or complements work that our Department of Leisure Services is already doing. So I'll make sure that we can report at that for the wetlands hearing in November.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Dumais? Yes, Ms. Gomes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I apologize if this information was already indicated in the package. I did review it, but I may have missed it. Mr. Dumais, essentially I was hoping to find out more about the proposed timeline. There are residential properties right near this site. I'd like to, and it's obviously Fern Street is a major road in this area, so I'd like to know how long the proposed construction will take, and also whether access to the park will be restricted at any time. Those are the two questions I had.
Mr. Dumais.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Commissioner Gomes, we will get an update on the project timeline. There was one within some of the application materials, but I'll make sure that our engineering division adequately addresses that. I think what you might see based on other related bridge work in town, they might give a broader range than they typically would due to some extenuating circumstances out of their control. There will be some impact to access to the park in the parking lot immediately adjacent to the proposed work. If you look in the material, so that's the parking lot to the west of the bridge. There will be some limited impacts and access to that lot, since the lot is going to be used as a staging area. There's also grading work within the water course, so a lot of the work will take place and be staged from that area. However, the overall park and park access will be kept open during this to the extent possible.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. I just noticed that Commissioner Lewis is here. Welcome. You actually get to vote on this one. You're going to be like right into the frying pan.
Thank you for having me, and excited to meet everybody, hopefully in person some point, and looking forward to working with all of you.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for volunteering. All right. Do we have any other questions on this determination of significance? All right. Seeing none. So as I just stated, Mr. Lewis will be. No, actually, do we have? We have everybody, don't we? Yeah, so we have everybody. Okay, so sorry, you won't be voting on this one, Mr. Lewis. All right, so with that then, let me try your minds. Will you please poll the commission? Mr. Dumais?
Mr. Binkhorst,
Has been a motion made?
You are correct, Mr. Binkhorst. There has not been a motion made on this particular item. I'm sorry. I was listening to Liz and she put it in my head that a motion had been made. So yes, please. Yes, Mr. Binkhorst.
I
You
would
have
love
something
to
to
make,
say?
I would love to make a motion that determines this potentially significant and schedule it for our next public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Binkhorst. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair. Mr. Binkhorst, any further comment on this?
No, just that due to its direct impact and work in the waterway, it's our, I think, standard practice to deem these potentially significant.
Thank you, Mr. Binkhorst. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair again. Any other comment on this item? I do concur with Mr. Binkhorst. This is pretty standard bread and butter, significant. So I would also vote on this as a yay. All right, so let me try your minds. Mr. Dumais, will you please poll the commission?
I'll go back to Mr. Binkhorst. Mr. Binkhorst,
Aye.
Ms. Gomes,
Aye.
Ms. Gillette,
Aye.
Mr. Prestige,
Aye.
Mr. Ahern.
Aye.
With that, the matter was found to be potentially significant and scheduled for public hearing at our regular meeting on Wednesday, November 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair again. Back to the agenda. I see we have no items under old business. Moving on to the Town Council referrals. Item number 5, Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Todd Dumais, Town Planner. The next item on our agenda, item number 5, is a referral from the Town Council. It's a resolution authorizing the town manager to execute an easement to support the construction of the Mountain Road and Albany Avenue intersection improvement project. Town Council received on September 8th, and it was referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's a fairly straightforward referral from the council. Since there is a land disposition involved, you are receiving referral. This project may look somewhat familiar to you. There was a associated wetlands application that was approved by the Wetlands Agency about a year ago for this intersection work. There are some upland review areas, no direct wetland impacts, but it was a large enough project that we brought it before you. And what you have before you is on the northwest corner of the intersection, proposed easement. There needs to be a widening of the Mountain Road to provide for additional turning lanes. That widening necessitates the relocation of a retaining wall and an easement onto the property to the west, and that's what's before us. This whole project was the result of a local transportation capital improvement program grant that the town received, the Lot SIP grant for congestion mitigation here. And I'm happy to answer any specific questions you have about the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair again. Do we have any questions on this item? Seeing none, this does seem rather straightforward. Then I'll entertain a motion on this item.
I move we refer to the approval to the town council.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. Would you say that the nature of your motion is that you're recommending approval on this item?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. Any other comment on this? I do not see any further comment then. Let me try our minds. Mr. Dumais, please.
Mr. Binkhorst,
Aye.
Ms. Gomes,
Aye.
Ms. Gillette,
Aye.
Mr. Prestige,
Aye.
Mr. Ahern.
Aye.
With that, Mr. Chairman, the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommends approval of the resolution authorizing the town manager to execute an easement to support the construction of the Mountain Road at Albany Avenue intersection improvement project. The next item on our agenda is item number 6, 511 New Park Avenue, application filed on behalf of Aldi, owner of property located at 511 New Park Avenue, also known as the West Hartford Place. It's located within Special Development District number 94. The application seeks permission to expand the existing Aldi building, enlarge and enhance the existing on-site bus stop and shelter, and make associated site landscape and parking improvements. This is a formal SDD referral from the town council. It has already gone before our design review advisory committee at their regular meeting in September, and it was found to be unanimously consistent with their design criteria and was unanimously recommended approval from our design review advisory committee. It is going through staff review right now. There are a few minor outstanding comments from our engineering division that were more requests that they look at additional traffic striping and signal modifications internal to the site. But more broadly, I'm going to try sharing a screen for everyone so I can walk you through what is occurring as part of this application. So now everyone should see a page 2 of the site plan. This is the existing condition survey. So what I'd like to do is orient everyone to what is going on here. This location over here that I'm highlighting in red, that's the Chick-fil-A restaurant. We can see over here the Aldi's. This is, again, the existing conditions. The bus shelter here, the entrance off New Park Avenue over here. This is the exit drive off that West Hartford Place shopping plaza. BJ's gas station is up here to our north. And what's occurring here is Aldi is looking to expand in this area here, their store footprint, and then shift some of the loading functions a little bit to the north. So with that as a brief orientation to the site, I'm going to stop drawing and go to the next page. What you can see here is what I just described there. That's the area of work in both the Aldi's parking lot over here on the bus shelter in gray is also an area of work. I'm going to go to the next page, which highlights really the plan improvements. So the improvements are to produce a very small expansion of the store footprint. This is one of the 2 remaining Aldi stores in the state of Connecticut that has not been upgraded to Aldi's modern prototype store layout. So if you've been to Aldi's anywhere else in the state except for West Haven, so apparently they worked their way down the alphabet, West Hartford and West Haven, you would see a slightly different format and look and feel of an Aldi's store. So this is a fairly significant reinvestment at this location. The store would shut down for a period of time during this construction and upgrade. There would be new mechanical equipment on the outside. The limited area of expansion is really limited up to this area we just discussed in the loading dock area. That provides for more back of house storage reconfiguration, which allows for a larger reconfiguration of the footprint inside the store. Because they're expanding into the loading area, they're shifting the loading dock and trash compactor a little bit north towards that BJ's, but it's in the same general configuration. As a result, they're changing some of the internal drive aisles and parking arrangements within the site, and also they're looking to expand or enhance the bus shelter. And this is not an insignificant improvement that Aldi's is going through. If you've experienced that shopping plaza and you've gone through this intersection, so we're talking about the bus stop before you enter into the Aldi's Chick-fil-A shared portion of the site. It's a sort of a weird traffic configuration, and oftentimes there's Connecticut Transit buses that will be double articulated buses or multiple buses queued up at that intersection, and at times they can block the full operation and access into Aldi and Chick-fil-A. So Aldi for several years now has been working with CT Transit to try to relocate the bus shelter somewhere else within the plaza. That's been unsuccessful. So finally, they've come back to the town and proposed some improvements that they feel might mitigate the problems occurring there. So they've really expanded the bus pull-off within the plaza. So they're actually broadening the pull-off area, so more buses will be able to queue. I just kind of drew the area there outside of the travel lane. They've also proposed restriping and rearranging the lane configuration there to help facilitate traffic in and out of Aldi's that doesn't conflict with the buses. This is a fairly significant benefit in staff's opinion to the overall site circulation. It will also upgrade the bus shelter right over here. If you've driven by that bus shelter is a non-standard CT Transit shelter. It's made up of a CMU block. There isn't a high degree of visibility into or out of the shelter. There have been several issues with that shelter in the past. So the upgrade to this enhanced shelter is a significant improvement for transit ridership within and to the plaza. In terms of architecture, there really are very limited changes occurring as part of this SDD approval. They're going to match all of the existing architecture of the building. And I'm sorry if scrolling quickly down to the architecture. So there'll really be no discernible change. They're going to carry the same brick pattern coloring into the new addition. And you really won't notice much of a difference. The new mechanical units will be about the same heights on the roof of the building and won't be any different visual appearance from New Park Avenue. Really what this application is predominantly changed to site circulation, some landscape change, but they're replacing that, and it's fairly limited, but I do think provides for a significant enhancement into the transit aspect that serves the plaza. With that, I'll stop sharing the screen for now so that I can see everyone, and I will welcome any questions from the commission through our chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Do we have any questions for Mr. Dumais? Mr. Prestige and then Mr. Lewis.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Dumais. Mr. Dumais, the little background on my perspective, I've had the opportunity to, I believe, see when Aldi went in. I've also had the opportunity to be here when Chick-fil-A went in. And I've witnessed over time that you have this great expanse of space on New Park and business come in. And that's just wonderful to see in that area of town, especially like this. It's nothing like a supermarket for a community and local community. But when you have these kind of, I wouldn't say random, but you have this development, kind of this, let's say infill, because I know that's a technical term from a planning standpoint. But when you have folks building out, choosing and building out new businesses inside a very large relative area here, it can go in a way unplanned, and they have to match up to see that Aldi and their developer there is taking some responsibility for making sure that they fit in to that bigger kind of communal use. You know, you've got the BJ's Gas, you've got the Home Depot, the Chick-fil-A, the Aldi's, and that they're willing to sponsor coordination, etc., for rearranging the traffic flow and then working with Department of Transportation on the bus shelter and everything. I think that I'd like to echo what you said, but to give you a little bit more color to that. And should everybody agree with me, and we do recommend this, certainly feel free to echo that to the council and the applicant when they get here. It takes a village to develop smoothly. So really appreciate that. Just wanted to add that, and then otherwise say that I don't have any questions. It seems to be very straightforward. It's good to see that DRAC had their eyes on it. Seems to, as you said, the outside appearance seems to be consistent with what was in the past. Not that there was any need to change it, or we would be, upset if somebody decided to propose it something different. But it definitely makes it easy from my perspective, sitting in this chair with this responsibility to say it's of no major impact. So just with those comments, no real questions, Mr. Chairman. That's what I'd like to leave.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair. Again, I appreciate those comments, and Mr. Dumais, I think that's the kind of thing that both the applicant and the town council would want to hear. Mr. Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hearn. A comment and a question, and just reiterating, I've left that parking lot, and when there is a bus there without a bus pull off, it does create a lot of congestion. And actually, as cars are still pulling in to go into Aldi's or Chick-fil-A, and some are going right into the gas station at BJ's, when a bus is there, there's no sight line, people are trying to get around it. So I think this is a huge step forward in terms of safety, because people are running across the street to get to the bus stop sometimes. So creating that bus pullover lane, I think, is going to be a much safer solution there, and I think that's a huge improvement. My question is, though, as you come into the parking lot, as you're coming in from, say the Home Depot side, as you're coming to take a left in the Chick-fil-A and to Aldi's, there's a left-hand turn there and a right-hand turn. When the parking lot is busy, when Chick-fil-A is busy with their drive-through, the way it's configured, as we all know, it's you have to loop around. It seems like as they're expanding a little island into that space, which would be just 2 lanes. And I would just question, that gets very congested there. And I would just question to make sure with that island that was built out, it almost looked like a little half crescent, that there is sufficient sight lines coming, because as people are trying to pull in and then they try to cut through into the Chick-fil-A drive-through and people are pulling out of those spots, it looks like that's created there from Aldi's, that people aren't backing in to oncoming traffic to get into the drive-through lane for Chick-fil-A. So I would just make sure that as we look at that map, it's something that's thought of, because I've also been there where that drive-through lane is backed up all the ways back into that intersection. And if people are trying to back out or park there, or the delivery stuff, to make sure there's sufficient room for that.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair again. Mr. Dumais?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm bringing up the screen through you to Mr. Lewis. I just want to make sure I understood that comment, and bear with me as my computer's
So yes, exactly where that silver car is, there's a little island just to the front right of it. As you go past it.
So if you see these cones right here, I think that's the area you're talking about, Mr. Lewis.
Yeah, so if you scan a little bit back to the right, it looked like on the map, was that island being expanded?
Yes, so I can pull up that map in a moment, but what's happening here are 2 things. So this is the loading dock as currently exists today, and that's being shifted to the north. As a result of that change, there are some site access issues that have to be addressed so that we can adequately protect the drive aisle. So this island is being shifted further this way in an effort to facilitate the new access in here. This is going to go away largely because the whole loading area is moving to the north. Whether or not Chick-fil-A needs to have this drive aisle access, many times that is coned off in high volume periods because of the movements you just described, Mr. Lewis, where if we have a lot of vehicles queuing out of the drive aisle length, what happens is they queue out into this intersection here, and that's problematic for the reasons that you just described. This area is an exit from the BJ side of the lot, and also, as we can see here in this Google image, buses can back up and queue through that. So the movement of the drive aisle north should help. Our engineering division asked whether or not Chick-fil-A needs to have this remain open. If they don't, they suggested closing that to then permanently cut off that connection. What happens if that connection's cut off? Vehicles have to queue through the parking lane drive aisles. It's a little bit more effort to find the drive-through, but it prevents that concern you have. So that issue has been flagged by our engineering division for follow-up comment from the applicant. But as proposed, I think the improvements are safer than the current condition overall.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair again. Do we have any other questions? Ms. Gillette, do you have anything?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Liz Gillette. My concern, as always, is about the trees. I see there are on the sheet marked LL1, they point out 2 trees that are to remain. And then I believe the 3 honey locusts One is near the stop sign, and then 2 are in that adjacent island for the existing trees. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Todd Dume, Town Planner, through you to Commissioner Gillette. Yes, that is correct. So you described the 3 trees that are impacted or proposed to be impacted by these improvements.
Oh, no, I didn't think they were proposed to be impacted.
Well,
There's a tree to come down in the island because the island is moving, and that will be replaced with a honey locust. Yes?
that is correct.
And then 2 trees will be planted in between the 2 existing trees to the west, on the west side of the property. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yes. So am I right in that there's only 1 tree to be removed currently, the one that's in the shifted island?
Commissioner Gillette, you are correct. Again, I'll just, a picture is 1,000 words.
Thank you.
This is the one honey locust that's in the landscape island that will be removed as a result of the proposed work. A nice little happy tree right there. I'll do my best, Bob Ross. The additional trees that are being planted, you are correct. These are the 2 trees that are shown on the plan. You can see one here right behind this vehicle. And the 2 new trees that are proposed to be added, which are also honey locust, that's why I misunderstood your first part of your question, are going to be added in this kind of general area here. One over here and then one further back here. So there's a net increase in shade trees of 2 over the current condition. But we will remove, they will be removing that one that exists currently and replanting a new honey locust in its place. Also, some of these additional shrubs are going to be impacted by the vehicle loading dock reconfiguration. Those will come out, and there's proposed compact inkberries to be placed in there as a replacement. The ones that are there now are a mix of inkberry, and also you can see those emerald green arborvitae right behind my little happy tree drawing.
Thank you, Mr. Dume. But these do not impact the trees that were part of the approval of the gas station? It's different property, correct? Or is it merged in the traffic issues?
No, there is some impact, but everything is shown on the plan. So the image that I just shared, the only impact, it's all technically one property. It's one large condominium.
Right.
So the BJ's parcel of the condominium, that unit, there are no impacts further than some of those arborvitae and other ground cover or shrubs that I just indicated. All the trees on the BJ side, there's no impact there. Like I said, an added net result of 2 shade trees to be proposed with no other impacts to the landscaping throughout the site.
Thank you. I know that honey locusts are beloved by shopping centers because they have very small leaves and are easy to clean up. This is by no means a make or break suggestion, but it is Charter Oak Park, and particularly the 2 on the western side have substantial amount of landscaping around them for root development, and it'd be kind of nice if those were oaks, but that's just me being the crazy tree person. Otherwise, I think this is a very nice application, and I agree with Mr. Prestige's assessment on the sensitivity to integration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. This is Kevin Ahern again. I was thinking when I looked at this that whenever I see a net gain of trees, it means that the applicant has been warned about Liz Gillette and made the smart decision. So, thank you. Do we have any?
You're welcome.
Do we have any further questions or comments on this item? Okay, so then I will entertain a motion on this item. This is a town council referral, so the nature of the motion would either be a recommendation to approve or a recommendation not to approve. Thank you, Mr. Prestige.
I'd make Kevin Prestige, I'd make a motion to approve, or to recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Any comment, Mr. Prestige?
Nothing in addition to what I already added earlier. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, then let me try your minds. Mr. Dumais.
Commissioner Binkhurst.
Aye.
Ms. Gomes.
Aye.
Ms. Gillette.
Aye.
Mr. Prestige.
Aye.
Mr. Ahern.
Aye.
With that, the Planning Commission unanimously recommends approval of Special Development District Amendment Application Number 94 for 511 New Park Avenue.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Moving on to the Town Planners Report, we have 2 items. Take it away, Mr. Dumais.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just pause one moment before I get into our next 2 items. Commissioner Gillette, in response to your comment, I was looking for a book behind my shelf, one of the benefits of being in the office here. There's a publication put out by the University of Connecticut. It's called the Urban Street Selection Manual. It's a guide for selecting urban street trees. Aside from the leaf structure that you just pointed out, honey locusts are extremely tolerant to urban conditions, both heating, salting, root compaction. So that's one of the reasons we see them often in urban environments. West Hartford Center being a classic example. They're a very hardy and tolerant tree. Your comment is well taken, though, regarding the selection of oak. I thumbed through that guide while we were looking in there. There's at least 2 species of oak, a scarlet oak and a pin oak, that in some instances can make an appropriate three of fascicate English oak that could make an appropriate urban street tree selection. So I'll pass that comment on to the landscape architect of record for the project.
Thank you.
So item number 7. This is a accessory dwelling unit zoning ordinance elements and research memo. It's a review and really a discussion of this memo. For Commissioners Prestige, Ahern, and Gillette, the topic is familiar, but I just wanted to back up a second for the rest of our commission. For several years now, the town has been engaged in a dialogue between the council and Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the topic of ADUs and zoning. It really started probably in the summer of 2018. There were several meetings with the the CPPS subcommittee of the council to discuss the concept of accessory dwelling units. Then in the fall of 2018, there was an introduction of a draft ADU ordinance that went on referral to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It was not well received by the Planning and Zoning Commission at that time, but for a variety of reasons, it was thought that it might be a good idea to take a pause on the ordinance and look in the Plan of Conservation and Development at this issue, or at least have a recommendation to look at the issue coming out of that process. As you are all aware, the POCD established a number of goals related to each thematic section, and within our neighborhoods and housing section, there is some language that identifies ADUs as a zoning tool that should be further reviewed that could provide an increased available range of housing type and affordability levels. The conversation started again earlier this spring and summer when the council was interested, or members of the council were interested in taking up the discussion again. We had 2 subcommittee meetings on a broader topic of housing choice and affordability, but also on accessory dwelling units. Commissioners Prestige, Ahern, and Gillette were invited to represent the TPZ during those discussions. We also had guest speakers from the CT Fair Housing Center and also Partnership for Strong Communities to talk about overall affordable housing and housing choice in Connecticut. As an outgrowth of our most recent meeting in July, there was a request for additional staff research to be provided to help inform the council. And I know our chairman asked for this type of research information that said, can you really tell us what's going on with other communities in terms of this issue? And the council was interested in critical elements for a well-crafted ADU ordinance. So the memo that I sent out was that research piece that I provided to the council, and I reviewed it with them at a meeting 2 weeks ago at one of their subcommittee council meetings. If you've had a chance to review that document, really at a high level, accessory dwelling units are really just a secondary residential unit on a lot that shares with a single larger primary residence. The accessory dwelling unit has to have a self-contained kitchen, bathroom, and bedroom. So that's kind of how I'm defining an accessory dwelling unit. And you may know them under other terms such as accessory apartments, granny flats, guest houses, cottages, in-law suites, secondary dwelling units. They go by a number of names throughout the country. They historically were a very common traditional form of housing type across the U.S., but really, we saw with the advent of modern zoning in the mid-20th century, many communities either banned them outright or placed a bunch of numerous regulatory restrictions on their creations. Much more recently, across the country and places that are experiencing housing shortages or they're looking to increase their housing stock and choice, you've seen a relaxing of that movement. And in Connecticut, there is a movement to permit ADUs and promote them as a means to improve housing diversity and affordability. So a lot of communities throughout the country are re-examining their current ordinances affecting ADUs. In general, my memo outlines critical components of ADU regulation. This should look familiar to the Planning Commission. We look at any ordinance, we talk about, you have to have a clearly defined definition of what is an ADU, what is the purpose or intent, why are we passing or proposing an ADU ordinance, where is an ADU eligible? Is it all single-family zones? Is it certain single-family zones depending on lot size? What type of regulatory process should we include for ADU development or contemplation? Are there occupancy restrictions? Do ADUs need to be owner occupied, or are they kind of free? What type of ADUs? Are we talking about only attached units, meaning internal conversions of within a building, or are we talking about that plus detached, or an accessory structure, a standalone garage that you can convert? Clearly, there are some design standards that any good ADU ordinance would need to identify. We'd have to identify setbacks and heights, size, parking, design standards. So all of that led us to kind of what are our surrounding peer communities doing? And I looked at the state as a whole. At the same time, there's an organization that's done this research. And of the state's 169 municipalities, 84 were found to permit ADUs as of right or conditionally. So that terminology really means either through a site plan approval through staff or a zoning permit through staff. 57 communities permit these via special use permit or special exception, depending on the parlance of the community. So that's a board or a commission, either the planning or zoning commission of those communities. And then there was another 28 that we couldn't determine if these were permitted or how they were addressed. So I zoomed in on that broader, higher level look, and I looked at 14 communities where we often look at, and they were all of our surrounding communities, such as Avon, Bloomfield, Fairfield, Farmington, Glastonbury, Greenwich, Hamden, Hartford, Manchester, Newington, Simsbury, South Windsor, Wethersfield, and Windsor. A couple of those communities from Fairfield and New Haven counties were included for comparable geographic or demographic purposes. We often say that we have some sister communities when you look at population and demographics in the state, so we'll often look at those communities. When I looked at all of those municipal zoning ordinances or regulations, all 14 permit some version of an ADU within a community. Bear with me 1 second, I'm getting a low battery message.
While Todd is doing that, I think for the benefit of the new commissioners, stepping back just a couple 100 feet, this ADU process, there's sort of been a shift of the relationship between the commission and the council on specifically how we deal with our role in the development of ordinances that affect planning and zoning. Because we had a couple come through that the council had crafted completely on their own. We didn't have any input. And then when they got to us, we went, oh yeah, this has lots of problems. And we sort of pointed them out. And, we sent a recommendation to not vote for it. And the council was pretty surprised, by that because they had already gone through this significant process. So what we did is we worked with the mayor and the minority leader to allow TPZ to have at least some, representation earlier in the process. So we've tried it out a couple times, and this is one of them, where myself and the vice chair and the minority leader, Liz, would go and be present while these things are being developed. And, with the understanding that, listen, we don't speak for the whole commission, but certainly having us at the table helps kind of say, well, I think that's going to be an issue, or this might be an issue. Sort of helps them kind of craft their, the way they do things. ADU is one of them. They sort of came out of the gate with something that was not quite ready for prime time. So they backed up on that process, and they're doing a much more searching and slow process. So this is coming out of that process. So that's where we're at with that. Todd, did I buy you enough time?
You did, however, my power feed cord clearly is not charging my device, so if I lose connection, I will jump on my cell phone and pick up the meeting from there, but I'll drain every minute of battery I have out of the bit of device. When I looked across those 14 communities, 5 of them permit as-of-right ADU development through either a zoning permit or a site plan review. That's Hartford, Hamden, Greenwich, Manchester, Wethersfield, and Windsor. 6 municipalities, Avon, Bloomfield, Fairfield, Farmington, Glastonbury, Newington, are via special exception from their Planning and Zoning Commission. And then the remaining 2 surveyed, Simsbury and South Windsor, have a hybrid approval authority depending on the type of ADU being requested. I'll touch upon that in a second. But all of them have some sort of clear and well-stated purpose or intent for their ADU ordinance. They have a well-crafted definition for what is an ADU. They define what type of ADU that they permit, attached versus detached. They do have some sort of design standards and size limitations. They have parking requirements. They have ownership requirements, and they define where they're permitted in their communities. They also include their approval process, and some of them have an ADU approval duration validity. Some of the communities make you give up your ADU if it's no longer serving its original intent or purpose, meaning let's say it was an in-law unit and your in-laws move away, or you sell the home, there's an occupancy requirement, you have to revoke the ADU requirement and notify the town and land records that it's been removed. There wasn't a single municipality, I would say, that has every critical thing. If you look at best practices for ADUs, Hartford's and Hamden seem to come the closest. South Windsor and Simsbury were pretty notable in that they have a split review. In the case of South Windsor, the approval process allows in-law units to be administrative approval versus their planning commission level approval for an accessory apartment. Primary difference between the two was how they're defining accessory versus in-law. Within Simsbury's ADU ordinance, again, they had a hybrid approach there that also permitted an as-of-right administrative approval process for attached units versus detached structure, which they make you go for a special exception. And then particularly for Josh and PJ, and I suppose Andrea or Gordon, if you're not aware, in West Hartford, we currently have what we call 2 accessory dwelling unit types. One is arguably not one, and that's a provision in our zoning for a guest domestic employee unit. And that one says specifically you could have another unit on a main residence somewhere on the site, could be attached or detached, but it has to be used for guests or domestic employees or the owners of the main building, and that they have to be employed on site or be guests thereof.
Looks like Todd's battery has run out. This is the first, everyone. So what we're going to do is we're just going to hold ourselves a little brief recess while we wait for Todd to rejoin the meeting. So we are in recess.
you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Dumais, we can hear you. You ready to proceed?
Thank you.
All right, so we just get the commissioners back and then we'll proceed. Ms. Gomes, Mr. Kaplan, Mr. Prestige. Liz, are you still there?
Gray Ghost in.
There we go. There she is. Mr. Lewis. We're just waiting for Mr. Bighorst.
I'm back, sorry.
There we go. All right. Please proceed, Mr. Dumais.
Again, my apologies, members of the commission. I think I cut off in the middle of describing the domestic servant employee type unit. Those units you can have as an accessory building, but you can't have a kitchen facility. So arguably, they're not perhaps the most true ADU. The other type of ADU we permit is a 3-room max unit. So it could be anywhere on a property, as long as it doesn't have more than 3 rooms, including kitchen facilities, but you have to have double the lot area for it to be a valid accessory dwelling unit. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to try calling in.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Brief recess.
Andrea, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me right now? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. You appear to be back using some good old-fashioned technology. We have
If
Mr.
this
Kaplan,
fails, I'll
Mr.
go-
Bighorst, Mr. Prestige, Mr. Lewis. Liz, you still with us?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. We have the commissioners back. Mr. Dumais, please proceed.
Again, sorry with that technology issue. If this fails, I'll go with a carrier pigeon next, and I'm sure we'll be able to provide you the information needed. So I started by talking about the other type of accessory dwelling unit we have in town, which is the quote-unquote 3-room max unit, but you have to have double the lot area. So you can have an accessory dwelling unit that's permitted as of right via site plan approval or zoning permit issuance, as long as you have twice the lot area in any of our single-family residential zones, but they're limited to 3 rooms, including a kitchen facility. So those are the 2 type of units we have to date in town. We conducted that research at the request, again, of our chairman and then also the town council. I provided that, and I think the council's interested in advancing accessory dwelling unit ordinance to come back before them and then ultimately back before you guys on referral. I wanted to pause there, and I'd be happy to take any questions you might have on ADUs or any other research. What is not included in the information provided, because the research is still being done, is I looked through our assessment records, and in town we have somewhere less than 70 detached accessory dwelling units that largely appear to be remnants of very old type of housing, either predating our current ordinance, but in any event, they're fairly old. We're trying to catalog based on the assessment records, get a little bit more information about the number and the exact number and location of those units. Our current zoning ordinance, as it's written today, has been in place for about 50 years, the best we can tell. So going back to the 1970s, the exact same language appeared in our zoning governing these. Before then, in the late 60s, there was a comprehensive rewrite of the zoning, so much of the existing language doesn't track neatly back before then, and I haven't found the same language in place before then, but they have been permitted in some form for at least 50 years in its current form, and some form before that. Based on the assessment records, there doesn't appear to be any fiscal impact of an accessory dwelling unit on the property values of either that property or a surrounding property. Again, those are detached structures that we know of in town. Obviously, they are picked up under the assessment records, so they are a taxable type of development. So that's picked up in the assessment records. Broader questions asked by our council, or were there any fiscal impact analysis done either here or anywhere else in the state for communities that permit them? At that time, the answer is no. I'm reaching out to some of our peer communities to get a better understanding if they have that information, or if they could provide us the total number of units that they track under their ordinances in those communities. I don't have that information at this point, but I wanted to provide the Planning Commission an update with the research that has been done to date. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Any questions? I think I saw Mr. Lewis raise his hand, and then Mr. Prestage. Mr. Lewis, please proceed.
So I've close to 30 years background in real estate, and I did read over this, and a lot of detail was provided. So thank you. But just a couple comments for people to keep in mind. I have seen a lot of issues arise from the real estate side and valuations for homes and communities that have come into play if really strict regulations aren't put in play. I've seen people starting to use these detached units, and they're out on VRBO. People are really using them as an income producing property. Owners are not living in the main dwelling of the units anymore. They've moved out and they're renting out two things. Sometimes bigger families than should be in the 3-bedroom unit dwellings are in there, where they're saying there's 1 or 2 people moving in and ends up being 4 or 5. And also kind of falsified leases are being put forward, where they're really short-term leases, or there's different people on a lease than people are actually living in the ADU unit. So, and that aren't family or different things. So I think if, depending on how many units we have, enforcement and having really strict protocols on this is important, because I have seen a couple communities where they had almost like one street where they all had detached units, and there's 4 or 5, and there were almost families living in finished off garages and so forth. And it created an issue on resale values. It created an issue of one time of getting somebody out when they were trying to sell the house. And also there were complaints in one of our neighboring towns of new people were in and out of there almost every other weekend coming in to use the unit. So I think that's an important piece as you all vote and put protocols and rules and regulations in place to make sure that there aren't those things happening, because I have seen it go a little bit towards the negative too when it wasn't enforced, and it was hard to enforce afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Mr. Prestage.
Kevin Prestage, Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Dumais. So I recall when this first was brought up, the first version of this, and I had similar concerns to Mr. Lewis. As a matter of fact, I think what he just stated, I had pondered, and those were my exact concerns. And so, when I think of permitting ADUs, I think at face value, based on how we're describing them and being used right now, certainly it makes a sense, certainly POCD looking for creative ways to come up with new residential units in town, certainly support that. That said, when I think of regulations and I think of deregulating, what are the unintended consequences? And what Mr. Lewis was providing with, kind of some anecdotal information is exactly what I think we want to be projecting, because this moment at this time with this vision is not necessarily how the markets will play out. What do I mean by the markets? Who are the actor? Who's going to come in and see these opportunities and use them for what they may? I'm not saying there's bad actors everywhere. I'm just saying we need to use some caution. A couple of things. When I think of the more kind of traditional, it's a accessory dwelling unit. It's what are you going to say? An in-law house, or it's a house we have next for a guest house. It's very classic and traditional, and that makes sense. But the fact of the matter is we live in a fairly dense community. Folks are, in my opinion, used to living in rather kind of denser, smaller structures. Apartment living, rental living is certainly something very common in this area. Hey, you know what it's from? Because West Hartford's really popular. It's a really successful community. It's walkable. It's neat. It's got a lot of good things. We are our own problem when it comes to that. It's certainly not meant in any derogatory way. But with that said, I don't know Mr. Dumais to head off those concerns about use of ADUs for short term, or for to create rental situations that are problematic for neighborhoods, essentially turning single family neighborhoods into multifamily neighborhoods without zoning. How do you head that off? I'm not too sure if you do that as a part of this regulation, this ordinance, or is it through enforcement of, renting, certainly like the classic Airbnb rental. How do you control that? I don't know. Or maybe it's a combination of the two. What I would say at this point is what I was going to say before Mr. Lewis brought up his points, just happen to be the same things. It was, we just want to examine that closely. We're not Avon, and if we're getting and if we put these relatively small ADUs close to the center of town, so on and so forth, they'll be attractive in ways other than just for folks, hoping to kind of age in place, which is a wonderful thing if we can do that and help families live on their properties. We just need to put something in place that meets all of those needs. Mr. Dumais, that's a lot of statement. I don't know if you want to make any comment on that, or just perhaps say we'll take it as food for thought, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prestige. Before we move on to any further comment, I do, Mr. Dumais, my question is procedural. This sort of like floated up. It was a big deal, and then it kind of faded, and now it's coming back. So where are we along the road on this? I know, so the council has asked you to do the research, and we were curious as well. So what are they expecting the next steps to be?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Todd Dumais, Town Planner. I won't speak for them, but I know they're interested in seeing some kind of draft ordinance or options for ordinances based on the research, along with more research that has not yet been provided. And they want to discuss that likely at a meeting, a subcommittee meeting of theirs at the end of this month.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
that's where we are at the subcommittee level.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. Ms. Gillette.
This is where I find these Zoom meetings, while useful in moving some issues forward, are not conducive to discussion. and batting around ideas, and is very frustrating. And this is a very important issue that I don't feel we've had the ability to have the kind of freedom either amongst ourselves or with the council. That frustration, I just want it on record. I looked at the surrounding towns and their ordinances and thinking about how to move forward, which is going to be painfully slow, but perhaps a suggestion that if we all look forward and look at provisions in other towns and pick out what is a priority for us and what is a warning sign individually as a basis of a discussion at a future date, to try to encompass the entire topic with all of its minutia is daunting. And I find there are things in other ordinances that I like, that I say, ooh, that could work, and there are others that I look at and I see a big hole.
Hey Liz, this is Kevin. Your connection is quite bad, and there's a lot of substance. There's a lot of substance of what you're speaking here that we're missing, unfortunately. I just want to make sure that you know that, because it is important for us to hear what you're saying.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start walking around the house and see if it gets better.
Well, I think for either for this meeting or the next meeting, we should maybe have you move to a telephone. Since we can't see you anyway, it may be better, because again, the substance of what you're saying is more important than being able to see you. Although I do miss you, but I'd rather be able to hear what you're saying, because this is an important issue in general, but this is a really important issue, I think, especially for your voice to be heard. So, given that, and I don't want to miss out on what you have to say, Mr. DeMay, is there a way that we can have this discussion? I mean, I don't know if maybe we're not going to be able to have this tonight because of the technical issues, but it's an important discussion for us to have. Do we have any opportunity prior to are they going to be meeting before we meet again? What's happening here?
Mr. Chairman, Todd DeMay, Town Planner, for the record, yes, the council subcommittee meeting should occur, if they schedule it on this topic before our November meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Election, a bunch of elected officials are going to stop and meet about this important ordinance.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Lett.
This was the preamble of what I'd said. We cannot, in this format, have the kind of discussion that is necessary. And maybe some new technology is out there, but this is not the way to talk about this.
So Liz, to the extent that I'm hearing every other word, I think the gist of it is that this is going too fast, and this particular format is ill-suited to the discussion of such an important item. I agree on the speed, to be sure. I think this is rushing pretty fast. I don't know if Mr. DeMay, there's any influence that can be had on pushing this to
more than
the beginning of the year.
More than the speed, it's the format.
Well, we're not having our finest technical evening tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're not. This is really not. Honestly, this is not a good discussion if we can't hear Liz. Todd, can we get her on a telephone?
Mr. Chairman, Todd DeMay, I provided her with the call-in information. I can try to call her at her home and see if we can get her in via phone. But Liz, I did email you the phone number access with the meeting code information. So you can join us that way, and the audio connection should be fine. Looks like she's coming online now. Nope.
No,
Just
can
to
you
play
get,
devil's advocate, and
Todd, before you speak in substance, I'd really like to get Liz on a clear connection. So Liz,
I'll
if you
try to
could
do
check
that.
your email and call into the meeting.
I can't check my email.
Mr. Chairman, if we pause 1 minute, I'll put myself on mute and I can call her.
Give me a number.
At her home number.
Thank you. Now, one more recess, everybody.
Hi. Hi. Oh, Doug, I got it.
Hey, Liz, you should mute your other connection,
Oh, God, I just
or just actually take yourself out of the meeting.
feeling off my arms and my legs.
Hang on. Andrea, can you hear me right now? Liz, can you say something?
Andrea, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Could you hear Todd as well?
I could.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, I have Liz merged on my phone line, so we're sharing one line as we're dialed in. So we'll just need to be clear to identify ourselves before we speak once we go back on.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair again. So for those watching from home, we have strung 2 soup cans together so that we may continue our meeting. And so, Ms. Gillette, if you could go back over what you were saying, because I don't want to miss, what you had said.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm so sorry about all of these technical difficulties. And thank you for your consideration. I think this is an example, this topic is an example of where these Zoom meetings, while very helpful in some areas, are not helpful in others. This is a topic, I think, that we need to discuss and discuss freely, with back and forth. And this format is not conducive to that. I think maybe a step forward to move the process forward, because I understand the council's impatience. I was looking through the ordinances for the surrounding towns from Mr. Dumais' report, and felt that there were aspects that I liked and aspects that I didn't like, and aspects that I had questions about, and little dibs and dabs. And I think maybe if we all went through those zoning ordinances and highlighted what appealed to us and what didn't, it might be a constructive basis for a further discussion on just exactly what Mr. Prestige was talking about, the unintended consequences, and certainly what Mr. Lewis, I think, highlighted in a real-world way very, very succinctly. But it might be a starting point for us to have something to offer to the council in terms of our recommendations or standards for an ordinance change. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Liz. This is Kevin Hearn, Chairman again. Mr. Dumais, what do you recommend for a path forward on this?
Sure. Before Mr. Chairman, Todd Dumais, Town Planner, for the record, before I answer that question, I just want to back up. I had started answering one of Liz's earlier questions. In my memo, I tried to point out that a successful ADU ordinance, the regulations are restrictive enough to prevent those unwanted development outcomes. I think those are the things that all 3 of you just articulated, but need to be flexible enough to actually support the production of ADUs. So with those, you need to really have a clear objective and purpose and reasonable standards. And I'm not presuming to say that, what the intent behind this is. I'm just saying, my research is trying to say, here's what you should have in them if you want to have ADUs in your community, and here's the important elements. With respect to the rushed comment, I want to speak. I know we don't have members of our council here. I think that's part of Liz's concern. This was merely a way to provide you both an update on staff research, and I think a next step forward might be I can discuss with the town manager, ensuring that representatives of the TPZ are invited to that discussion later in October. Liz, I do like your idea of going through some of those peer communities and highlighting elements or aspects you think are important if the town is going to consider bringing or moving an ordinance forward, to consider those elements. I think that is a constructive way to approach the dialogue. If Mr. Lewis is still there, I also think it would be helpful. I haven't come across the actual market research that seems to show a negative impact of an ADU on valuation. So if he is able to, based on his professional background, if he's got access to that information, that would be particularly helpful. I know some members of the council asked for information like that. So I think probably the most constructive way forward is taking an approach that Liz came up with, having the whole commission go through the material and emailing me individually. I can then compile that into a document, email it back out with everyone, and that can be used as that conversation point with the council at their next meeting where they discuss this topic.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Gillette.
I agree with Mr. Demay. One of my very real concerns is there are things that I would underline in here that there may very well be debate and argument and convincing and common ground for me to cross that off my list. And that kind of discussion is not taking place. That's my very real concern. I understand the constraints that we're under in these difficult times. But this is a biggie. The other thing that I haven't seen, other than anecdotal comments collected in a word cloud, is where is the need? We're talking about what could be, doesn't have to be, but could be a big change to zoning in some zones. I haven't seen any objective demonstration of need. And anecdotal stories about 7 houses among 1,300 houses in a particular narrow zone expressing a need is not objective. And that to me is a very real baseline that I haven't seen except for a few people saying, I want it. Maybe it is. But I have yet to see that either. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. Mr. Prestige.
Kevin Prestige, Mr. Chairman, just through you to the commission and Mr. Dumais, just want to hit a little bit of the reset button. We've gone down a path of, and I think I added to the snowball effect on this with regards to looking negatively on the ADU ordinance. I want to just make sure this is at least my comments and my perspective is I make sure I balance it. So, paraphrasing the neighborhoods and housing part of the POCD, to enhance and maintain West Hartford's existing neighborhoods and encourage a diversity of housing types and costs to provide access and availability of housing options to current and future residents. We also have a lens that we, looking at the POCD, in which we look at, the goals and strategies and objectives of the POCD, and one of them is innovation. It says West Hartford will continue to embrace creative and innovative thinking to promote the town's continued successful evolution. So I think I'd just like to again, with that said, I think this needs to be explored. I think, the world turns whether we like it or not. And while I think we should introduce the perspectives that Mr. Lewis gave anecdotally, I had reflected earlier, Ms. Gillette is also echoing too. I'd also say I really want to look into this. I think things are changing. We need to look into this for our community, for the development of the community. And I really look forward to hashing this out. It's a really interesting concept. Let's be innovative here. So, Mr. Dumais, thanks for all your work over the years, and then this analysis that you provided. Let's keep going with this. is I guess what I really want to leave as the message here. So good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. So as far as a path forward, Mr. Dumais, before we get into any more substance tonight, then is the recommendation then to take what we have here, provide our comments to you via email, and then those will be combined and then sent back to us? Is that what you're proposing?
That's what I was proposing, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. So is there anyone have any concerns about that, or are we all comfortable? Mr. Lewis, did I see you raise your hand? I'm sorry. No, you're good? Everybody's okay. All right, everybody's good with that? All right. So that's what we'll do going forward, just so we can move past this. Liz, are you good with that?
What I was also going to say, though, and this is what I consider one of the problems here, is that the underlying assumption is that growth is a good thing. And we talked about this in the Plan of Conservation and Development. And just because you can attract and put in more is not necessarily where we want to go. And this is all based on the assumption that more is better. And that's one of the discussions that I really feel is missing here. Do we want more people? Do we want to be bigger, denser? It's assumed that that's a good thing. I don't know as it necessarily is. There are many aspects of this that need true discussion, and I too compliment Mr. Dumais and the work that he's done, and I think we definitely could do with some homework by looking at these ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. All right, so that's that sounds like the path that then we'll forge forward on this, and we can move into the next bit on the agenda, which is going to involve a little bit of homework. Mr. Dumais, please kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Dumais, Town Planner, and thank you for that introduction. Yes, I think this document is intended to provide the Commission with some homework, and what I tried to do is put something together. This was an idea that the Town Manager and I had to create a strategic plan to advance initiatives that come out of the POCD, and trying to look at realistic 18-month schedule of things which are identified in the POCD as things that perhaps either a lead, as I've described them here, a lead organization or a partner organization could take upon themselves in the next 18 months to help move the ball forward, so to speak, with implementation of our POCD. What I did was I reorganized our implementation plan out of the POCD, and I pulled out things I thought were important or things that could be achieved or at least started in the next 18 months. I grouped them thematically, and then next to each action item, I try to also indicate the relevant guiding lens that Mr. Prestige identified to show that many of these actions have multiple guiding lenses that they touch upon, or themes that they touch upon. So I went through and just tried to pick out those things that I know are important to the community, either that we're under state mandate to change how we're doing something, right? We know that there's an impact to us coming down the road. Many of these initiatives are important to other boards and commissions, as this is a plan for the whole community. Some of them are larger, more important issues. And again, I wanted to try to take a first stab at that and provide that to you. I'd like you, in an ideal situation, is to go through these and tell me if I missed anything, if I got something wrong, or if there's, ideally, if there is one of these or multiple of these action items that you feel are things that the Planning and Zoning Commission could really be the lead organization moving forward in the next year or so. That's the purpose of this document. And, again, when we started the POCD implementation and update, 20 months ago, we all agreed that we wanted to ensure we have a document that just doesn't sit on a shelf and is never used. And It's only paid homage to by land use attorneys as they come before boards and commissions or people opposing a development. We thought it should be a useful tool to help guide the future growth and development and change within our community. So I think this is the attempt to try to do that and keep it in the forefront of our decision making and our strategic actions that are going to involve more work, more studies, more collaboration with other boards and commissions. And that's really the purpose behind this plan.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. And it's just, for Commissioner Kaplan and Commissioner Lewis's benefit, the Plan of Conservation Development was a work of this commission. Very recently, we spent, some of 2018 and almost all of 2019 drafting this, and it's our every 10 years document that the town uses. Probably one of the most important things that this commission does, and by the end I was pretty sick of being in a room with these people. No, I'm kidding. We actually, it was a labor of love, and what I wouldn't give to be back in a place where I was sick of being in a room with people. But this is what I really love about what we're doing here, is because one of the things that we wanted to make sure is just what Todd said, is that this doesn't just become a dusty old document that nobody does anything with. I mean, we put a lot of work into it. We had very substantive discussions, and I really think we came up with a good product. And this is step one in seeing that this plan starts to become implemented. So we're all going to take this list that Todd put together and start banging out what we think are our priorities. That this commission can work on. I mean, I'm really excited about this. This is great. So I don't know if we have anything, unless anyone has any questions as to sort of what our assignment is for the next meeting. But if not, Todd, do you have anything else to add to that?
Mr. Chairman, again, Todd Dumais, Town Planner, for the record, I don't know that I do. I would say that this document is also intended, to serve as a working guide, as those of you who have been on the commission know, and for our newer commission members, there's a pretty large swath of staff departments that had a role in the development of the POCD that support other boards and commissions. So, the idea is to share this with a working group of staff that can help champion and facilitate, other boards and commissions review, because, there's a lot to do here in the next 10 years, and it's going to take the whole village.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. So I guess then we'll move on. I see we have no information items. Do you have any late information? I'm sorry, Mr. Binkhorst, do you have a question?
A copy of the POCD? Can you send around the link, perhaps?
I will do that, Mr. Binkhorst. It's also on our website, but I'll send out a link to that. I can also send out a printed version. I think I did that after the adoption, but I'd like to send out a printed version as well.
Yeah, I would like that. I never received a printed one.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. And Gordon, I would recommend reading the printed version before seeing the movie. Otherwise, it will ruin the ending for you. All right, so we have no information items.
Just before we move on, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
I sent a welcome packet to our two new commission members, and in there are printed copies of our most current zoning regulations, subdivision, and wetlands. If I'm going to send out another round of POCD documents, if you could email me if you want any of those other documents printed in paper copy as well. I think now having a paper version when we're doing virtual meetings is even more important, so you can reference those and pay attention to the meeting on the screen. So if you need a copy of the paper document, we'd be happy to send you another copy. Just send me an email.
Thank you, Mr. Dumais. This is Kevin Ahern, Chair again. Do we have anything further? I just wanted to note that if you look at your agendas, the future TPZ regular and special meetings, we've got the 4th of November, the 7th of December, and the 4th of January. The way that we've been doing it is, you notice that one says 6 p.m. and then the next two say 7 p.m. And it's just sort of because we're kind of following with the governor's orders. So, 6 p.m. is a better time for everybody for these virtual meetings. But the normal time when we do start meeting in person again will be 7 p.m. But for every virtual meeting, It will always be at 6 p.m. That's all I have. Anything from you, Mr. Demay?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Demay. This is Kevin Hearn, Chair again, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Gillette. Then, Mr. Demay, will you please poll the commission?
Mr. Pinkhurst.
Aye.
Mr. Gomes.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Mr. Prestige.
Aye.
Ms. Gillette.
Aye.
Mr. Hearn.
Aye.
With that, there is a unanimous vote to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
PJ. Thank you, Josh. I'll see you guys at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you
Good
very,
week,
very
guys.
much.
Month.
Liz, you still there?
Sorry. Yeah, I am. I'm sorry to be such a Luddite.